to this video on Be Your Own Advocate Part 1, Know Your Student Rights. Let's begin. Disclaimer. The views presented in this video are the opinions of Heather Lumen and are not meant to represent those of CCBC or any other institution. What is an advocate? To advocate for someone or something is to support that person or thing. An advocate is a person who supports someone else. Being a student is challenging. In this video, you will learn how to support yourself through your academic career. How to be your own advocate. The two parts of being your own advocate are knowing your rights and communicating effectively. That is the 1-2 punch of being your own advocate. In this video, we will solely focus on knowing your rights. What are your rights as a student? What are your rights as a student? We will talk about in-classroom expectations, grading, extra support, and accommodations. Let's begin. In the classroom, you have a right to an instructor who arrives on time or early to class, communicates clearly and effectively during class, holds regular office hours outside of class, communicates due dates and deadlines clearly and well in advance, answers student questions, and creates a safe and respectful learning environment. Regarding your grades, you have a right to frequent, timely, quality feedback on assignments. Let's discuss exactly what that means. Frequent means several assignments evenly spaced throughout the semester with quality feedback included. Timely. The feedback should be provided in time for you to apply the feedback to the next test or assignment. Quality. The quality of the feedback should be such that you know exactly what you did wrong and what you should do differently in the future. There should also be transparency in grading. This means you should be able to understand exactly how each assignment was graded. Let me show you an example. Here are two exactly identical problems. On the left side, however, the problem was graded differently from on the right side, even though in both problems the student work is identical. So take a minute, pause this video, and see which feedback do you think is better. So it's pretty clear that there is much less feedback on the left side. On the left side, all that we see as feedback is that red X. So we know that it was marked wrong. One question I have is, how many points was the question worth? How many points were deducted? Why was the question marked wrong? And what was the correct answer? So even though it was technically graded, we have a lot of questions. Let's turn our focus to the right side of the page. So again, on the left side, we have poor feedback. On the right side, we can see that the problem was worth 3 points. We can see that 1 point was deducted because the student added 3 to both sides instead of subtracting 3, and that feedback is right here. Furthermore, the correct solution was provided below and the correct answer. Now, for me personally, when I'm teaching, I don't usually write out the correct solution on every single assignment. Sometimes I will, but oftentimes it's very tedious and time-consuming. So instead, what I do is I post detailed solutions to assignments after the deadline so that any student who wants to, who missed points on a problem, can open the solutions and see what should have been done. And so this is an efficient way for me to provide meaningful feedback to students. So again, you can see on the left, again, we have poor feedback. We're missing a lot of information. On the right, this is an example of good feedback. So in addition to understanding how each assignment was graded, transparency in grading also means that you should be able to know or find out your overall course grade at any point in the semester, not just at midterms and finals. So there are two main ways that grades might be calculated in any class. Those two ways that we calculate grades, one is through points and one is through a weighted grade system. So here's an example of a points grading system. So as you can see, there's a total of 500 points in the course. So it looks like there are 10 quizzes for a total of 100 points, meaning each quiz is worth 10 points. Exam 1, Exam 2, the projects, and the final exam, these are all worth 100 points. So again, this is a points-based grading system, just one example. A weighted grading system looks like this. So you have quizzes, homework, exams, and a final, and they're each weighted differently. The quizzes are 10% of the overall course grade, as is the homework. The exams are 60% of the total course grade, and the final is 20%. So in a course, if it's a points-based course, You can have a total number of points that's anything you want to. It could be 500, 1,000, it could be 10, it could be anything you want. But if you have a weighted grade, your total percents must always add up to 100%. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. Now, obviously, your course information is going to be different because I just made up these examples on the fly. So where can you find this information about how your particular grade is calculated? Well, you can find it in your syllabus. So this outline, like I've shown you here, whether it's a points-based grading system or a weighted grading system, will be found in your syllabus. And you should be able to find your own grade somewhere in the learning management system that your institution uses. So you should be able to use either the points or the weighted system to recreate your grade and reproduce whatever your overall course grade is based on that information in the syllabus. So in addition to all of these things that you have a right to, rubrics should also be provided beforehand for large projects or assignments, and there should be objectivity in grading. So let's start by looking at rubrics. So why rubrics? Some courses have larger projects or papers that are worth a significant number of points towards the final grade. For such assignments, the criteria for the project or assignment should be clearly communicated at the time it is assigned. By providing a grading rubric at the time the project is assigned, the instructor makes it clear what they are looking for as they grade the project. Students can use rubrics to self-grade projects and assignments before submitting them for a grade. Hopefully you can start to see how using rubrics really creates objectivity in grading. So here's an example of a rubric. So if you want, you can pause the video, read over it for a minute, and see if you think this is an example of a good or a poor grading rubric. So one thing you can see here is there's a list of graded items that are clearly and objectively measured. So for example, the first item says, state your topic and explain why it is of particular interest to you. And you can see over here that that is worth 2 points. So this is pretty objective, right? This is pretty straightforward. There's not a lot of room for subjectivity or interpretation. In other words, if two different people were grading this project, it's very unlikely that one person would claim that the topic was stated and explained why it was of interest, and somebody else grading it would come along and say, well, I didn't see the topic or understand why it was of particular interest, right? You're either going to have that information or you're not. So let's look at this grading rubric. So again, pause the video, read through it on your own, see what you think. Well, the first question I have is under here for answers, it says that you get partial credit if some answers are correct. Well, how many is some, right? That's very vague. Now I have another question. Similarly, for work shown, it says, well, you get partial credit if some work is shown. So again, that's very vague and debatable. Then we have neatness. Well, neatness is pretty subjective. What might look really neat to one person might not be neat enough for another person, or vice versa. And lastly, possibly even the worst offense of this rubric is that they're trying to measure effort. And honestly, I have no idea how much effort or energy you put into the project based on the result, because I don't know you. I wasn't there when you were working on whatever assignment it was. So there is no way to measure a person's effort based on the results. So hopefully we can agree that this is a poor math rubric. And the sign of a good rubric, I would argue, is that anyone using the rubric to grade the assignment would award the points in the same way. Again, this guarantees objectivity in grading. So to sum up, you have a right to frequent, timely, quality feedback on assignments. You have a right to transparency in grading, which means that you should be able to understand and see exactly how each assignment was graded, how points were awarded, and you should also be able to know your overall course grade at any point in the semester. You should also be provided a rubric beforehand for large projects or assignments so that you can self-grade before you submit it and know exactly where your points are coming from. And again, there should be objectivity in grading. So hypothetically, if two different students turned in the exact same project or paper or whatever, obviously that would be academic integrity issues. But let's just pretend that somehow they created the same exact paper or project just by chance, right? That those two submissions should receive the exact same grade. If everything is exactly the same that was in the project or the paper, right, then the points should be awarded identically. So that's what we mean by objectivity in grading. Extra support and accommodations. Most institutions have support for both academic and non-academic concerns. Take advantage of them. Find out what they are and use them because they're free. Also, most institutions offer accommodations for students with disabilities. Students are responsible for scheduling an appointment and presenting appropriate documentation. In other words, the institution is not going to come to you and ask you if you need accommodations. It's your responsibility to seek out those accommodations and provide appropriate documentation. So let's review your rights as a student. In the classroom, you have the right to an instructor who arrives on time or early to class, communicates clearly and effectively during class, holds regular office hours outside of class, communicates due dates and deadlines clearly and well in advance, answers student questions, and creates a safe and respectful learning environment. Regarding grading, you have a right to frequent, timely, quality feedback on assignments, transparency in grading, which means understanding how each assignment was graded and knowing your overall course grade at any point in the semester. It means that rubrics should be provided beforehand for larger projects or assignments, and objectivity in grading is a must. Last but not least, you have the right to take advantage of all of the extra support, both academic and non-academic, that your institution provides, and you have a right to accommodations if you qualify for them and submit the appropriate documentation to your institution. Please watch the next video to learn about communicating effectively.